Great honor to welcome you to this, our second presentation of this spring series. And we'll be featuring the gentleman with the walking stick down here, Zach Fowler. I'm sure you're all looking forward to hearing from him. I actually stole this off his website. I hope he doesn't mind. But I thought it set the stage in a way that I really thought it was good. And it's actually a quote from one of our, I would say, probably more rugged presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "Courage is not having the strength to go on. It is going on when you don't have the strength." Very apt quote, I think, for our speaker today. It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce Fowler to the Ollie Sage audience today. Give him a welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. It's like pretty much covered it all, so I think we can go home now. No. Yeah, I'm Zachary Fowler. I was born and raised in Vermont, and if you have read the articles on it, they say Mainer, Zachary Fowler, one alone. I kind of got adopted somehow, even though you're supposed to be 3 generations here in Maine before you are considered a Mainer, so I don't know. Hope I'm not disappointing anybody. But New England, anyway. So born and raised in Vermont, right there in Rutland, Vermont, near Killington. I grew up, wonderful parents. They took us outdoors all the time. My dad, that's where my sense of adventure came from, I think, is my parents, because at a very young age, they'd take us to the golf course late at night. You know, it was dark, snowstorm. We're out there with flashlights, and they're sending us down the hill towards the river and in sleds, you know, things that parents wouldn't do. They said that they actually sent me once down the hill in a sled in a car seat and had to chase down, because I was so little, they had strapped me into the toboggan or something in the car seat. They had to run down the hill, and Dad had to grab it before it went into the river. Obviously, I was the first child, and you know, so my parents were just figuring out how to do this, you know, at a young age. And so as I grew up, that was our life. My dad worked as a carpenter, and then on the weekends we would spend time as a family going places. He loved to drag us off to like Fort Ticonderoga, looking for some plaque where a battle was fought, supposedly by Benedict Arnold or something. We'd spend all day looking for the battlefield or like the spot where our ships went down, and we'd get there and it's hot and this old Volvo, and there'd be nothing but a little teeny plaque, and that was the adventure. But we never knew what we were going to find. Always garage sailing and having adventures. Every weekend he'd take us, we'd go somewhere, do something, on big hikes up to Deer's Leap, and I just grew up in the most beautiful place, New England, you know, going New Hampshire and hiking and adventures. And my parents, they just instilled that in me at a young age, as well as being Christians and taking me to church on Sundays. Like the sense of adventure just continued to build, and I never forgot that. And then after high school, I spent all my time during high school getting bad grades. But my gym grade and my art grade brought my other grades up enough I was able to pass. I had dyslexia. I found out in first grade, after the teacher standing me up in front of the classroom and making fun of me in front of the other kids, that my mom had dyslexia, and she fought for me to be tested. And they brought me in, had me tested, and sure enough, I had dyslexia, and it was the reason I couldn't stand up in front of the classroom and read in front of everybody. So I was able to be enrolled in a program that allowed for me to be taught at a slower rate. Even to this day, I still struggle. It never broke for me. My mom did a lot of reading practice when my grandfather was an eye doctor, and it broke for her. But for me, it never broke. And right on through high school, I was unable to keep up with the reading assignments and things like that. And I ended up finding audiobooks and falling in love with audiobooks. And it gave me the ability to do the reading assignments by listening to them. I found that during that love for audiobooks, that I really loved books. Even though they were one of the hardest things in the world for me to tackle, I never gave up at it. I kept reading or listening to books all that I could. It became a thing for me to find books that had pictures, because it was the easiest way for me to read them, is if there was something like an achievement each page you turn over as you read it. The audiobooks became something that I would listen to like 2 or 3 a week. I'd get them from the state. They would send them to me, whatever book I wanted. Sit in my room and I'd build stuff. So from a very young age, I started building everything and anything. My parents' broken calculator with a solar panel, I turned that into like an electric Lego car, that was able to drive across the table. So I was always getting in trouble as well for disassembling things that weren't broken yet, and then might not work after they were reassembled, but like the car stereo, they still hold that against me. Like, I'm not allowed to take things apart and put them back together. Even though I have a good success rate, they still remember that beautiful car stereo that never worked because the one screw that I didn't put back and shorted it out. So I grew up making stuff. I was in my senior year in high school. I spent a lot of time in my room. My dad built me a sewing table, and I was skateboarding a lot, so I found that I like to make my own skateboarding clothes. I took a home ec class, and it just it took off for me. So those home ec classes and the art grades and gym grades were the ones that kept me floating through high school to be able to pass. So I started sewing, and I thought after high school I would go and be maybe sew and design my own snowboard clothes. I went and applied to fashion school, and I just didn't like the crowd so much of being. I wanted to snowboard and skateboard and be outdoors and have adventures, and there was sticking in yourself in an office and just working away at things and having to do like the college curriculum these days where you have to do what they want you to do so you can do what you want to do after. Just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want to be locked up for 2 or 3 years and then get a chance later to do what I wanted to do. And my dad suggested, at that point I was actually I made 3 prom dresses for girls that year too. So not for myself, I made dresses for other people and skateboard clothes for myself. And I even had some of my stuff in an art show, and but it just wasn't as hands-on and as real as I wanted it to be. And so randomly, my dad had been to a woodworking show in Saratoga and met the Landings Boat Building School was up there from Kennebunkport, Maine. And they kind of hit it off and spent like an hour talking there at the show. And he was like, hey, let's skip out on school. And this is my senior year. I'm supposed to be preparing to go to college and not really feeling it. And we went up there to Kennebunkport, Maine, and went in and we saw the boats and the smell of the cedar coming off those shavings as they were building a Herreshoff 12.5, a Buzzard Bay boys boat. And you see them all over the place here during the summertime. Beautiful boats. And I just fell in love with the crafting. And they were like, you realize that you've never built boats before? And when we started talking about me coming there seriously, and I was like, right now it just seems like the coolest thing you could make with your hands. These beautiful pieces of curved wood. I know carpentry a bit from my father teaching me stuff. It was so amazing. The outdoors and the sailing and the open sky and the smell of the ocean. I was in love. That year, I graduated high school, and the next year I went up there as a 19-year-old on his own for the first time, and that was trouble. So I ended up having an apartment with a couple other people from the school, and going to boat building school. I took the small boat building course there at the landing school, which you build a peapod, I believe it's called, lap strake, and it was out of plywood, and you build them in groups of 4, and then we built a Herreshoff 12.5, and I think in a group of 5. I spent all my time there building the boat, and then after work just making all kinds of crazy things. I was known for building the weird stuff after work, like a wooden shoe, and I was sure that it was going to take off. It was my $1 million idea, a beautiful lap strake wooden shoe that looked like a boat, but it kind of blew apart and didn't work out so well. As much as I had a difficulty with reading, God gave me that much more of a gift when it came to working with my hands. And when I recognized that early on, I did everything I could to possibly learn from books new and creative things that I could get my hands on and build. And the boats gave me such an outlet for that I ended up doing that right up till I went on alone. It was just so much fun making boats. They were the unique lines to them, and then seeing something you built out there sailing and somebody having fun with it and enjoying it, and the look on their face as the wind and the smell of the ocean. It was like that, all those romantic moments in books that I loved so much as I listened to them. So I did that, and after I finished school and graduated, I headed down to, I think it was Connecticut, for a job at Pilot's Point Marine, and worked there doing not as much of the wooden boat stuff as I would have liked. So it was, there was a good guy there I started to learn from for a little while, and I managed to learn some more skills, but then I started getting into, like, they wanted me to do fiberglass work, and it really wasn't something I wanted to do. Moved back to Vermont for a little bit, helped my parents do an addition on their house, and then found a job up here in Maine at 21. At Rockport Marine, they were building the schooner Lynx. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's a teaching ship that's been up and down the coast here and out in California. If you see the movie Blackbeard, it is the ship that's in the movie. And you can see my woodwork actually getting blown apart. I'm hoping that was CGI, because I moved up here to work on that when I was 21, and it was the coolest thing. That was an amazing year working on that boat there. The first thing I got to work on was the spars when we got here. I got put with a crew up in an upper shed while the boat was being built, and I glued up at least half of the masts and spars on that boat and shaped several of them. Spars are like one of my favorite things to build. It is the most unique thing. You turn it to 4 sides and 8 sides following the design, and then you have to sand it round, and as it comes out and it's all finished, and then you put that first coat of varnish on it, and that grain from that Douglas fir just pops out of it. It's nothing more beautiful than that first coat of varnish on something beautiful that you've made, and seeing it just look so clean without any sanding scratches. And then I got to do the inside of the boat, and I did the cabinetry down in the galley, doing the drawers and matching the period and style of the boat, turning custom knobs. My dad had taught me lathe work, so I used to rough out all of his spindles for him on the porches that he did. And I think at the end I was even finishing them for him and doing the full finished thing. So I turned some knobs to match the period there on an old lathe they had in the corner they hadn't been using. Did some of the decking on the boat, and we launched the boat, and that pretty much ended my job there at Rockport Marine, because I was 21, and at the same time as I was working there, I was also learned how to play pool when I first moved to Maine. I was actually making more money playing pool than I was going to work, but the hours don't line up, because you go to play pool and you get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you find that your employer doesn't like you too much when you're dragging through the door like this, and they want you to be awake and aware. So my first year being 21 was a tired one. And in the end, Taylor Allen of Rockport Marine said, "I think this isn't going to be a good fit continuing on. We appreciate everything you did." And so I learned a hard lesson that way, that I need to grow up a little more. I ended up working around all the different boatyards in Rockland and Thomaston, right up into Belfast there for a number of years, about 2.5 years at each boatyard, until like the big project or 2 projects were done, and then I'd go and find another project at another boatyard. And that was the best way to be able to follow the more beautiful boats, is to finish a project and then have to move on to somewhere else to a better project. So that kept me busy, but as the years went on, I found that building boats was really fun, and the only reason I loved it was because of making it and making them. And I actually enjoyed my time after work more, because I had access to all the tools in the shop to building the things that I wanted to make after the hours. And I made all kinds of crazy stuff, from turning my Dodge minivan into, after watching that show Pimp My Ride, I made all kinds of woodwork inside the car and fancy, and installed a TV in there and stuff like that back in the day, and had it all modified out and trimmed out and stuff with woodwork. And it's like multiple other little projects like that, whatever suited my fancy. And I found that I wasn't too into the sailing. Sailing was beautiful, and it was fun to be out there for a little while, but after doing some long trips, that as you're sailing along and you watch the guy go out on a lobster boat to go lobstering, and you're sailing into Rockport Harbor, and then he comes back in at the end of the day and you're still sailing towards Rockport Harbor, I was awful antsy to get off the ship, and I'd already been on it for 3 days, and I'm like, this really wasn't what I loved. I love making stuff, and being stuck at sea wasn't my thing. And so it became a little bit of a bane of my existence in some ways. I loved making things. I loved the creativity of it. I love the smell of wood when you're shaping a board and you run that plane across it and your tools are sharp and the shaving comes off in this beautiful curl, and the smell of that cedar, or working with the mahogany and you varnish it and that grain just pops at you. And so as time went on, it became a little harder and harder to go to work. I found a better job where it was more traditional boats. I started a job at Northeast Boat working for Josh Howard up in Northport. If you're ever up there heading towards Belfast from Camden and you go past this boatyard that says Northeast Boat and you see all these, in the springtime, you see like 6 or 7 of these beautiful Harrishoff 12.5s out there, all rigged up and ready to go in the water for the year. And beautiful presentation of boats there. You can hardly get any work done in the spring because so many people are stopping in and just want to pet the boats all the time. It's a blast. I get to spend more time visiting in the springtime than we did actually working. So that kind of revitalized my, this is more creative stuff. I got to work on these smaller boats. Somewhere along the way while working there, I was feeling a little, in my personal life, I was just me living out in the woods. I had bought my land almost 10 years ago at that point, and I bought a piece of land in Appleton, Maine. And it was way out in the woods, almost a mile out into the woods. It was just 2.5 acres. It was a right-of-way through somebody else's property that I had to it was an old skidder trail, and I had to hack it out of the woods to clean it up so I could get out there. I dragged the camper out. You see the camper in the video there. We actually attached that to the yurt. And I started living out in the woods in a camper, and I built a complete building over top of the camper. And it was all out of logs, and then we got these shrink wrap plastic from the boatyards, and I shrunk wrap it completely over, so there was this door you go in, and this giant, half the size of a chicken barn. You get in there and it's all gravel, and it was set up kind of like the way people set up their campers at campsites and stuff, all pretty with a little fire pit in front and a wood stove and cooking area outside, and then inside was the camper. And I lived there for 10 years, and I was had all these, every year I was oh, I'm going to build a home, but it was so convenient. And I was able to spend all that extra time that I wasn't bound to a bigger house or bills. I'd go out on Saturdays and I'd buy these books at garage sales, these old books. I'd be like, oh, this is great, or thrift stores. And I just kept nurturing that love for books. So half of my camper was rebuilt into shelves that held all my books. And I'd spend every Saturday hunting books, and then Sunday morning I'd get up and I'd sit there all morning, drink my coffee, and read these books and study the different plants and the flora and the fauna and traps, and go out and then try to apply that stuff to homesteading on my land. I built all kinds of little wild gardens. I tried to incorporate plants that were already native, and then I'd use the stuff that I learned in the books, primitive traps to catch the woodchuck that was trying to eat my cabbage that I was trying to grow, stuff like that. So I kept experimenting with these primitive things to be a homesteader, I wanted to learn about appropriate mushrooms to eat so I could put them on my pizza. Not because I was trying to harvest enough food to survive on or anything like that. I never wanted to be a survivalist necessarily. I just wanted to be prepared. And I figured that was my best way to prep. So as the years went on, I worked less and less as it was okay with the boss. That was one nice thing, is they let me work 30 hours a week so that I could spend as much time as I wanted playing outdoors. And I just kept nurturing that love of the outdoors, and my area of love shifted from boats to making bows and making all this stuff out on the land. You saw in the picture there, when it showed my place, there was the hurdle wattle fences. I built raised beds that I made compost beds, dug them down, and made all these hugelkultur hills, they call it, which is a layering system of debris. And so I hacked all of that out of the woods by my own hands, dragging almost everything I had up at my house up there on my back, because during the winter time you couldn't drive into the driveway. It was a skidder trail, so mud season you couldn't drive in, wintertime you couldn't drive in. The only time you could drive in is when it all dried out in the summertime. The rest of the time, everything came up to the house on my back. And that made me pretty strong after 10 years of dragging sleds and carrying 5 gallons of propane and 5 gallons of water with me up there. I made a well, but it kept always drying out. And it was so easy to live a minimal life. We thought of it as a minimalist. We didn't need much, so we didn't bother to kind of do more. We just had fun and stuff. And then along the way, it got kind of lonely as time went on, and I was home in Vermont, and I put an ad on Craigslist that said, "Woodsy woman wanted." Pictureless applicants need not apply. Thank you very much. But then there was this beautiful woman, Jamie, and I was like, and she's like, "I love being outdoors. I can start a fire. I can kill and cook a chicken, and and I knit." And I'm like, I think this is my buddies messing with me, because they were the one that said that they read Craigslist all the time. I think they sent me and so I Facebook stalked her and to see if she was real, and she was real. I couldn't believe it. So I sent her a message, and I said, yeah, I'm interested. and you're being interested. And so we started talking, and I drove home from Vermont after spending some time with my family, and she had me over a week later, and it was my birthday, and so she killed and cooked a chicken that she had there, and finished the winning of my heart there with that delicious cooking. She can cook a chicken like nobody's business. She is an amazing cook. And I met her daughter, Abigail, and Abby was 1 year old at the time, and her birthday was a couple days later, and we just hit it off. We spent 3 months dating and ended up moving up to the land together. We found a yurt that needed to be rebuilt, and we rebuilt it up there at the land, put it all together, and lived in it for an entire summer and got married. And then the first winter we attached the camper to it, because all we had to start with was the camper across the yard, which we kind of retired and thought we were going to be done with and when we moved into the yurt. But it was only a 12-foot yurt, and it was the three of us. And so I built a rustic bed for Abby, and we kind of had a really difficult summer. It was so hot that summer in this tiny 12-foot yurt with the sun baking down on it, because I had cleared a space for it right in the middle of the sunny main spot so that it would be nice, but it kind of backfired. It was so hot. But we ended up attaching the camper and figuring the whole system out and ended up living there for 4 years until the Alone show. And my daughter Sparrow was born in the meantime. 4 of us living there for a year when I went out on the show. And it was amazing. We had so many adventures. We kept up with going out on garage sales on Saturday. We started getting goats and doing more homesteading. We bought canning systems, and we cooked at the end. Before I went on the show, we were able to have, each year we were canning enough tomato sauce that we could have 2 meals a week, 1 pizza and then 1 pasta dinner with the tomato sauce. We had dried food that we had made from all the extra stuff in the garden that we would put into stews. And we had enough goat meat that we had a year's worth of goat meat that we had raised ourselves and processed, and we would can it, so we would have 2 meals a week with either stir-fried goat meat, which is, it's so good. I love goat meat. It's amazing. I never thought it would be like that, but it's a really tender, good meat. And in the sense of achievement that comes from processing your own food, and how clean it is, and how it just makes it taste so much better, anything you do for yourself like that. So we had built up to maybe 15, maybe sometimes 20% efficiency of providing food for ourselves for the year that we didn't have to buy from the grocery store. We were shooting for a 70% at some point, and during the summertime we were probably at, for maybe a month and a half or so, we were at about 70 or 80% providing all of our own food for ourselves, and then down to about 15% for the rest of the year of not having to buy stuff from the store. So that was a pretty neat achievement. But then during that time, the yurt started to get tinier, even though it was still the same size. And we were watching shows like Naked and Afraid on our TV, because we had a TV on every wall, because it's a yurt, only one wall. Little yurt joke. And we watched shows like Naked and Afraid, and I was like, man, I could do better than that. I've learned so much from these books. I could do better than that. And Jamie got sick of hearing it, and then I was like, I just don't want to do it naked, And it's like, I was starting to gain weight. I had, they thought I had Lyme disease at one point, and so they gave me the medicine. It messed my stomach up about 4 years ago now. And my stomach was all from the antibiotics. It like killed everything that's good in your stomach. And I was having a hard time. I wasn't able to have dairy. Carbs made me sick, and I started to balloon up over the last 2 years before I went out on loan. I weighed 223 going into that. And so it was like, it was really a hassle, you know? I tried to not eat, but I was always hungry. And so cutting myself off on food wasn't a diet that had worked for me. And I didn't know what to do except for just continue to work hard. And I worked so hard, I couldn't understand why I was continuing to gain weight like that. And I felt tired all day until noon. And it was something I'd actually even struggled with a bit more leading up, ever since high school, kind of. I always felt I had a bit of tiredness, and like I never woke up until after dark. And it was like, that's when I felt like the most awake. And then I had a hard time falling asleep at night a lot of the time. And so leading up to the show, it became an aggravation. I mean, I walk out into the woods. When we were living out there during the winter, I had built a sled out of a pallet, and I'd bring home 2 more pallets for the goats so we could increase our goat pens. And I have 2 pallets with another pallet underneath that had skis on it and wooden handles that I could pull. Abby would sit on top of that with all of our groceries, 5 pounds of gas for the generator, and about 5 gallons of water. And that seemed like every other day I had to bring that home, or at least that amount of weight, not the gas, that was like once a week, but like every day I had to bring home 5 gallons of water, because when it went from just me having 5 gallons every 2 weeks to Jamie, who likes to wash dishes for some reason, the water went like that, it kept going. So I'm dragging this stuff up. I'm like, who can pull like a mule like that, almost a mile out into the woods, dragging a child? And then when Sparrow came along, 2 kids on a sled like that out into the woods every day, plus being out there and late into the 7 o'clock during the wintertime, splitting wood every night, preparing wood and doing all this stuff, and I'm still gaining weight and feeling like tired and weak at times, and it didn't matter how much I ate. And I ate well too, because Jamie cooked like the most wonderful foods. We were always having just beautiful, healthy, organic foods. She really an amazing cook. And so it was like, it didn't make any sense. I wasn't eating like tons of sweets all the time. Well, sometimes in the morning with my coffee. On the way to work, I always had like a little Danish or something. But it's like, it didn't make any sense. But my stomach got even worse over the last 2 years, and I couldn't eat certain foods. It got to the point where my favorite food being pizza, I couldn't eat it. And then Alone came on TV, season 1. And we watched Alan win after 56 days, I believe it was. And I was like, that's awesome. You get 10 items, you get to go out there, you get to survive, and you have to film yourself, you're all alone. I was like, that I could do. I could probably even do better than that. And Jamie goes, I dare you. And so that's where it began, right there. When somebody challenges me, I have to eat. That's something I've always, I got in trouble with my dad all the time. That was the one thing we always butted heads with. If he said he couldn't do it, or dared me to do it, I would always have to do it to prove somebody wrong. Which is a strong suit and also annoying to people that love you. But, so I sent in a message to the show. And I thought to myself before I sent the message, I looked at their page, and there's this big, long application process. And it required, they wanted you to send in a video, and they wanted like all this information, and I'm like, I don't like all that reading and all that paperwork. I'm just gonna send them an email that says, like, my selling points. And I knew that to sell it to them, I needed to highlight all the things that are important to them when they do a show like this. And when they're doing a show like this, you always notice, like on Naked and Afraid, they put 2 people that clash together, right? They'll put like, the Marine and like a hardened feminist, and they'll put the 2 together and just so they can create drama. And then I figured out from watching Alone that they choose kind of like the village people. They got the fireman, the teacher, they have all of the different aspects. You want your scientist, your botanist, whatever. Each of those different categories. And so I said, all right, what do I have to sell myself to them? I go, I got it all. I'm a ginger-bearded wooden boat builder that lives in a yurt in Maine and likes shooting slingshots. And I just took on shooting slingshots just before I sent this message because watching Naked and Afraid and all the shows, I was like, why doesn't everybody bring a slingshot? I think that would do so much better. You could get all the small game and stuff. So I started shooting slingshots just before I applied. I sent that message in and I said, check out my Facebook. I've been putting up pictures of all the little gardens we built in the yard and different things like that, and our family out in the woods having adventures and starting fires. And they were like, we'll take you. I get a message like, we'll take you, but just for the preliminaries, fill out the application. We're going to send you a video camera. We want you to film yourself out in the yard doing an overnighter, or out in the woods doing an overnighter, so that we have some footage to show on the show leading up to it. And so they sent me a camera, and I did the whole application process. And I went out there, I took my snowmobile, and at that point, finally the last year we were out there, I had gotten a snowmobile, and I drove it out into the woods, and I took the camera and I set it up, and I go, like Home Alone, oh no, my snowmobile's broke. I'm stuck in the woods. All I seem to have with me is my axe, and my flint and steel, and this empty water bottle, and the Allen key for taking out the spark plugs. And so I kind of like set the story up to tell the story. And I've always been a storyteller, as you could probably tell. And so, I was like, I'm going to tell a story to the camera, and I'm going to mimic what they do on the show. So I took all that gear, I got out, and I said, well, I need to get something to drink. I don't know how long I'll be stuck out here, so I should think about necessities first. At some point, I'm going to need something to drink, so I'm going to need fire, shelter, and water, and at least if I'm going to be overnight, and something to eat would be good too. So it was that weird warm spring we had 3 years ago when I made this before the show. And I took and cut a tree branch and used the tap to take the wrench off of the spark plug wrench, the chainsaw. I think it was actually a chainsaw wrench. And I turned it into a sap tap and put a hole in the tree, put the sap tap in, and I hung that empty water bottle on it so it could collect water. I found a big rock that I had out there that I always imagined like making a little home under it. And I made this like shelter in between these two big rocks, and a fireplace that was in there, and the heat could go out, and I made some hurdle wattle fencing. I hung up a string in there, and I said, this is where I'm going to hang up my knickers at night so they can dry out, and they loved that. And they loved the sap tap. They still talk about that to this day when they like tell people about how to make your casting video. They're like, we want to see creative things like this. And I made some pine needle tea and sat there, and I spent the night with the fire going and hot rocks underneath my pine needle bed so I could be warm in there. And then I talked to the camera a little bit, and I found some grubs under some bark and showed them that I have the strength and fortitude to do whatever it takes to survive by like, this is all I got for dinner, eating some bark grubs from underneath the hemlock and bark, and get all close to the camera like they do and get emotional. Like, if I was out there, I would never give up for my family's sake. Pretty much the exact same thing I said at the end of the show there. And sent them the footage, and they're like, awesome. Boot camp is in 3 weeks. I was like, are you okay with this, Jamie? You know, it's like, you kind of started me on this path. And she's like, go. He's like, yes, win us a new home so we can build a house up here, so we can afford to build a nice place up here. She's like, I want an upgrade. Mama wants a new house. And so at that point, Sparrow is not even 1 yet. She's just about to turn 1. So it was kind of hard to leave them, but I felt like I needed to do what I needed to do. That like everything, all this rough living out there had been building me up to be able to achieve in a challenge like this that I could do well at. Because it didn't seem to me, in my mind, it seemed like it was pretty much the same thing I was doing at home. Just, I'd just be going out there and doing it. I had 10 items. I don't even use 10 items to build half the stuff I do around the yard each day. Just go out there and I'd homestead. And then when it was all over a year later, because I thought that for sure maybe it might take as long as a year, and that's what I would do. And she would wait for me. And so I went to the boot camp. And we get to the boot camp, and I was so bummed. I got there, and these guys are there. There's 20 people that were picked from the boot camp out of like 50,000 people that sent in inquiries. 5,000 people fully applied to the show, going through the same process that I did, the filming themselves and then filling out this giant application of like 3 pages long. And I was like, oh my goodness, these guys were all like just like Dan Walwack that was on the show. He was like the Green Giant. He was huge. I just pictured him going out there, and he's just going to grab a boar and just twist its head off like Ozzy. And it's just like, He's like, and just, he'd eat the thing whole, and then he'd be good for like another month. I mean, the guy was huge. And then there's Dave, who's like, yeah, I survive, for a month at a time out in the desert all the time. I have 2 sticks. I rub them together when I want to fire, and I throw a stick at something else when I want to eat it. And I'm like, how do I compete with this? And other guys that are, I've been going to survival camp. I spend $5,000 or $10,000 a year spending all my summer at survival camps, learning how to escape and evade, as well as like survive off of nothing. And like another person's like, have you even ever been to the edge of hunger? And I'm like, no. Like, it does 5:30 and my meal's not ready yet count? Because I did that once. And they're like, have you ever been alone? And I'm like, for like a week once, because that was the most I'd ever been alone. Before I met my wife, I was out there in the camper, and I went like 3 days, and I was like, I don't have any work building boats at the time. It was like a midsummer break, and I was like, I haven't heard it. My phone hasn't rung for 3 days, and I talked, and I was like, well, I don't even think I've talked for 3 days. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to shut the phone off. I know to check it in a week. I heard I would be hearing back from the boss if we'd be doing something, and so I went a whole week without talking to anybody, and it was or anything else, but I still had food, and I was in my camper, and I was spending my days playing out in the woods and stuff, and I it's like watching TV at night, so I wasn't even all that like super secluded or anything. So that was the most I could go on, what it was like to be alone. And I was like, oh, that was fun. I was like, I could do that a little bit longer if I had to. And for the last 4 years, I had been living with my family in less than, the yurt is 12 feet, right? And then the camper, so it's like this whole thing maybe only had this many square feet of actual walkable space in the entire place that we lived right here. And the rest, so it was like, it was tiny. Where's the alone time when you have that and you got 2 kids? If I'm out in the yard, Abby would be with me, following me around, talking to me, while I'm doing stuff, telling me all her little, the fairies that she found and different things. And we'd be playing together as a family. So I had no experience on being alone, and I just knew that this was something I wanted to do. So the boot camp thing was like getting there and meeting these other guys that all have these amazing stories already of adventure and discipline in the knowing the plants. Like Carly and Callie and Megan knew plants. Like as we were there, went outside and they're telling us about camera equipment, and they're like, oh, this is something genus species Apagata, and I'm like, I can't, with my dyslexia, I can remember things visually, but I cannot, even to this day, I don't do videos on my YouTube channel about plants and things because I always get the name wrong. I don't know, I know what plantain is, and I know what the other ones are by sight and how to use them, but to name them is like, I almost always get it wrong. And it was a little discouraging that first day. I called Jamie and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. These guys are so skilled. They have so much going on. And she's like, you're tired, you've been traveling all day, go to bed. When you wake up in the morning, you'll remember that you're really good at this and that you'll do just fine. I was like, all right. So we go through the boot camp, and the first 4 days of the boot camp was just tests, doctors, things like that to make sure that we were gonna be okay, that we're not gonna get out there and die. And during the testing, I hid from them that my stomach issues. Like I literally, I had such a hard time with it. I was trying to be very careful. I had done a cleanse before heading to the boot camp in hopes that it would kind of fix my stomach some, and it made me feel good for 2 days, and then I was kind of back feeling sick again after a little bit each day. I'd eat, and then like 4 or 5 hours later, I feel like a little just dumpy and just like slow and sluggish, and then as the evening went on, I'd start to get more energy and stuff, and then I'd have a hard time sleeping. And I figured that none of the questions directly asked if your frequency to the bathroom, so I could just leave that out. They don't need to know that. And so I passed the medical test. I almost failed the psych test because they asked me if there was anybody that's out to get you, and I had said, yeah, on there. And they're like, we got one problem here. You said you believe there's people out to get your neighbor. Do you believe your neighbors are out to get you? And I said, yeah, and they're like, there's one indiscrepancy here. And I was like, well, no, you don't understand. They really are out to get me. Like, I had bought it right away, and the guy that I bought it from died, and the neighbors that inherited it have made it their purpose to like make everything miserable by bringing in all this garbage and placing it all down the driveway on either side. And I'd come home sometimes and there'd even be piles of junk in the middle of my driveway, and they don't even live there. And like piles of 2x4s that they were going to salvage and build a home out there. Every year they say they're going to build out there, and they never do. And I was hoping one of the reasons they're going to win so hard was so I could buy the rest of the land and not have to deal with them again. And so they're like, oh, well, now that you explained it, you don't sound quite so crazy. So okay, we'll give you a pass on this one, and we'll believe you. And then came the physical and outdoorsy test to the side of the boot camp. They take us out there we were in New York, and they take us out to a park that we were going to be able to, like a national park that they had permission to operate in and film and test us with starting a fire and things. And they let us eat the morning that they brought us out there, and then we were to spend 24 hours without food. And when we got there, they had us do shelters, so we all made shelters, and then we went around and evaluated each other's shelters. And that's when my confidence, really started to come back a bit. Everybody did shelters, and they were all pretty nice, but I made mine with bark shingles, and I thought it was pretty fancy. And I did lose 1 point because there was a deadfall above that, it was oak though, because oak branches, have you ever tried to break off an oak branch? Even if they are dead, they're still miserable strong. And so I knew that, and I'm like, it's not a deadfall. Like you guys the evaluators are from England, and they're British SAS or something like that, and these guys are, they're tough looking guys. And so they're like, that's a deadfall. And I'm like, yeah, I was gonna get that down after, I was done with building my shelter, because you guys gave us a certain amount of time. And so I got it down with throwing a string over it, pulling it down. It took forever because it didn't want to break. It was oak. And so I kind of lost a point there, and I was like, darn it, I know that I was safe. And so we spent the night in our little shelters, and the next day they had us do a fire. They wanted us everybody to do a bow drill fire. And they were going to evaluate us. And it was spring in New York, and it was damp there. There wasn't a lot of good dry materials, and one person got a fire, young Zach. If you watch the show, you see he leaves in the second episode because he cut his hand on his axe, because he tripped and cut his hand. And it wasn't even that bad of a cut, but because of the previous season, somebody had cut themselves really bad. They called the medic, and they needed to actually have stitches because their tendons were torn or something. And so we were told to call the medics and then they would evaluate you if you were allowed to stay. And he made the mistake, I think, and he does too now, of calling the medics and letting them look at it. And they were like, we can't clean this really well out here. And they're like, we're going to have to pull you. And if he had just wrapped it up, maybe they would have come a couple weeks later. They came every couple weeks or so to check on us and give it a medical evaluation. He would have been able to show it was clean and not infected, and he could have kept going. But he called himself out, and he was the only one, though, that was able to start a bow drill fire. It was wet, and he got just the right combination of woods, and he was very good at it already and managed to get a fire going. The rest of us all did our best, and we all got smoke and came pretty close. And so the whole point, though, was they didn't care that we didn't get a fire going. They wanted to evaluate how we behaved, how we went about it, how we built what we were going to build, and how our behavior was as we were hungry because we hadn't eaten since the other morning. And so now it's been 24 hours. Noon rolls around, and we were supposed to get food, and they're like, I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. The food hasn't come. I still think that's part of a test, and there was actually, they just were hiding the food until they were ready to reveal it. They wanted to see how we behave. And I felt like, and I was watching other people and how they were behaving, they didn't think about it like that. And I felt like right from the beginning, everything we did was a test and an opportunity to show them that you have what it takes to be on the show. So when we got there to the boot camp right from the beginning, they had some cameras that were in our face here and there, and I made sure I always played it up for the camera. I was always willing to be like, hey, they're in front of the camera. And I was like, because I figured the more I'm on camera, the other people in the higher ups that are back in the office checking this footage out are going to be like, man, that guy is he's right there on the spot. So and he's not afraid of the camera. So. Then they sent us out to do one more project. We all had to make 2 traps so they could evaluate us. And the traps I made were ones that I had seen in books and actually never tried. but I wanted to do something that looked as spectacular as possible, because I didn't even know they were going to ask us to do this. So I'm like, I'm going to do these. So I did the 2 traps, and they turned out to be, I call it now my upside down figure 4. I've done a YouTube video on it in my 87 days series. And I made this cool figure 4 trap that they hadn't seen before, the way it comes apart, and it worked really well. They tested it, and boom, it went right off. And my second trap was another complicated trap as well that was a snare trap, so that had like a funnel system, so the animal comes in, and it puts his head and bites the bait stick, and the snare grabs onto him, and it would like catch a rabbit or something like that that came and stuck its head in it, and it worked perfectly when I was showing it to them. And so I like got big points there. They were very impressed. They had said they hadn't seen that one before, and they hadn't seen the other one applied in that manner. So I was like, yeah, I'm nailing it. And then when we went around and looked at everybody else's traps, only like one other person had done 2 traps with complication. The rest of the people had done like just a snare loop on a stick, and they're like, if a squirrel runs up, he might fall into this, and that was like all they had done. And the other one was like just a regular, very nice, but they put everything into that one trap to show off their skills. And so I was like, good, I feel like I nailed it there. And then it became time to eat. And they're like, there's one complication. It is rabbits, and they're still alive. I'm like, yes, this is so easy. We raise rabbits for meat. Like this is a cakewalk. And so like in preparation for that, I started walking around picking up acorns. Everybody's like, what is he doing? I'm filling my pockets with all these acorns. There's beautiful, large acorns there. And I'm getting ready to do my rabbit. And they give us our rabbits, and some people were a little squeamish. I had to help one of the girls dispatch her rabbit, but I just grabbed mine and did it up and skinned it and prepared it. And I got over by the fire, and mine's still hanging up, and I skinned it so I still had the skin on it. And people were like, that's a weird way to do it, but that's kind of neat. It protects it from the flies. And I'm over there by the fire, and I'm boiling these acorns. I boiled and rinsed them 4 times, because you got to get the tannins out. It's like they're super bitter, unless you get white oak, and these were red oak. And so I boiled them, and then I start mashing them up. And meanwhile, everybody else is taking their rabbits, and they're hungry because it's been over a day and a half now since we ate, and they're burning them over the fire. And like some people are already starting to eat, and I'm like doing these acorns. And then I made a paste out of them. And I took my rabbit, and I took the legs off, and I rubbed it with an acorn paste. And the camera comes over, and I'm like, today on Backwoods Iron Chef, we have hair with an acorn paste, and I'm going to pan-sear this really quickly to lock in the flavor. That's the best way to do it. And then we take and put a little water in there, and we're going to let this slow simmer over the fire for about 2 to 3 hours. So 2 hours later, everybody's still picking rabbit out of their teeth because they cooked it right out of the fire, and they're like trying to get I'm like, you got something, little, half a leg, a rabbit leg stuck in your teeth there. And then I open my pot for the camera, and the steam comes out, and the smell, and everybody's like, oh, that smells so good. And I take a pair of chopsticks I'd made, and with the chopsticks, I just grab the rabbit meat, and it just falls off the bone. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. It's like, it was so delicious. I took the time to cook it, and it was so good. So we finished up the boot camp, and I was like, I think I nailed it. I think I did a good job, One of the people even was like, don't film me doing my bow drill. It's not working. I don't want anybody to see me doing this the wrong way. And I'm like, he just voted himself off the island. It's like the whole point is like, you're going to be on camera all that time. If you're not going to film yourself doing stuff wrong, that's what they want to see is the suspenders and making mistakes. They want to see you crying in front of the camera. You just got to, they want to see the emotions. And you can't be self-editing and hiding that stuff. And I knew that, and I was willing to do that when I came into it. So I left the boot camp, and they said, a week later, we will be able to tell you if you're on the show or not, and we'll leave it there for a minute and take a break. They call me a week later. I'm building boats that day. I go out into the yard. My heart starts racing like 100 miles an hour, and they go, like all a big sigh on the other end, and I'm like, oh, great, they're going to tell me. And she goes, how'd you like to go to Patagonia? I'm like, I did it. She's like, you're in. If you want to go, you're in. I'm like, yeah, of course I'll go. So we had about 3.5 weeks to get ready. And we knew that was going to be the schedule, so I had already just mentally tried to prepare, made giant lists of all of the possible 10 items that I would take, and I had a final list even of the 10 items that I was going to put together to take with me. And then they said I could go, and I had to start all over again. And like second guessing myself and figuring it all out. My family and everybody was not supposed to know where I was going. We weren't supposed to talk about it to anybody, so of course, my family knew. And they were, and even the aunts and uncles that weren't supposed to know didn't know, but they knew I was having an adventure. And a bunch of them put some money together and donated some money so I could buy 10 items that I needed to be out there instead of just taking the stuff some older stuff that I had. They wanted to see that I had fresh gear, fresh clothes, good equipment. Of course, my first stop was LL Bean. I got myself my jacket, my vest, which is now like my signature vest that I wear all the time, the orange vest that I wear in my YouTube videos and everywhere else, and that I had on the show. And I took all my gear that I purchased, and I hacked it all. Everything had some sort of a modification to make it better. We weren't allowed to take a vest, so I cut the liner out of the inside of my jacket and stitched in an old zipper from a previous vest and zipped the vest into the jacket as the liner of the jacket, because we were allowed a jacket with a liner. I added tassels to all the zippers that could be turned into fishing lures. I took my multi-tool, which was a Swiss Army knife multi-tool, and modified it so it had a spoon gouge, a gut hook, a sewing awl needle that would had a little hole through it so I could stitch leather with it. And then I sharpened another tool that was on there, was a chisel-ended wire stripper, and I turned that into another knife. A slingshot was one of my 10 items, and we were only allowed to take 2 slingshot bands and 30 pieces of ammo. So I painted all my ammo hot pink. So if I had a chance to shoot something, maybe I could even reclaim it and get more than 30 shots out of it. Since we were only allowed to have 2 bands, I brought 2 6-foot-long bands. And so when they're evaluating our equipment, I'm like, this is my slingshot, my 2 bands, And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. This is how I use it all the time, And they're like, all right, if you say so. I mean, we don't shoot slingshots, so we don't know. And I go, right on, And then I made like a saw sheath that protected my saw. And if you could roll the clip, I made a saw sheath that protected the saw that had leather on it. And that's before, right there. I weighed 223 going in. And there's me after. I lost 72 pounds. My BMI coming out, I look a little bit like a concentration camp victim, but I still had a little bit I was like, the day they came, I was ready to be like, I thought they were there to pull me because they were so doer-faced, and they were like, I thought for sure they were going to pull me, and I was like, I still have a little bit on me, I can still go. And there's my 10 items. There's my saw, my axe, I call this my slingshot quiver, so they let me bring it, because they were very fastidious about everything. My orange hats that Jamie had made me. That was everything I took. That whole pile there. That's all I had with me for 87 days. That was all my clothes, everything. Because even the clothes that you see in there I wasn't wearing at the time. I was wearing the other clothes. The next day we put on that stuff that was there. That's all the stuff I made when I was out there. 87 days of whittling. I made 200 sets of spoons and chopsticks. Those are actually what was left after Christmas. This is a bird. That's a little bird I made for Sparrow, and a rabbit for Abby. A wand I made for Abby, and a wand for Sparrow, and a little whirligig thing. Slingshots. You can see all this stuff when you come up here. This is, now I've even given more away. Second Christmas and stuff. That was my shelter out there. That was, we went out and visited 2 days or 3 days after I had won, when the snow had lifted. And I got to collect a couple more things from my shelter that I left behind. It was just some little, I left my boots there, I think. That was the only thing I really left. And it was such a snowstorm the day they came and got me. You can't really see it on the footage because it let up for a little bit. And it was a long time. So we go, I pack, I get all my gear hacks in order. We go to the airport. Jamie's bringing me to the airport. I bought her a car. With the last of our money, so that she would have a new car, something dependable. And that's the Duck Hunter. I don't have a good slide presentation, so we're stuck with getting it as it comes out. That's the Duck Hunter 3000, the Mark II. I'll get into that. That had a propeller system right there. That was a propeller, and it motored out into the water and did my fishing for me. It had a fishing rig on it. You saw it in the video that would pop up and snare fish when they bit. And I made a new one on my YouTube channel that's the first version, which had a paddle wheel on it, and that's what I use some of my extra elastic bands for. The water bottle that I made out there so I could have water, a wood water bottle, and carry it up over the hill, because my shelter was way up and over this hill. And then the little sparrow birds that I carved, and rabbit. So we drive to the airport, and the car breaks down. Of all the times, you know, I got 25 minutes to spare because we were stopped at LL Bean and I bought like one last piece of clothing that I was hesitant to buy before. And we are there on the side of the road. Jamie jumps out with Sparrow in her arms and puts her thumb out to thumb a car down. Of course, somebody in a Subaru pulls over. Beautiful people. And they give me a ride. They're down the road. They're like, oh, we can bring you to the next exit. And then they're like, you know what? We'll skip our son's basketball game because this is too important. You know, Jamie's shoving Sparrow through the window so I can kiss her goodbye one last time. I had to leave my family right there on the side of the road waiting for AAA to bring a tow truck. It turned out to be just a leaf in the air filter. That was all it was. Somebody had not taken the air filter out and a leaf got in and it was just shutting off the air. It's like, it was a weird way to start the whole thing and very hard. You know, I'm like, I spent all this time away from my family and this is like this rushed goodbye I had to give them. So I get to the airport, 3 planes later, I'm in Patagonia, 2 days and 3 planes, and we arrive there and they bring us to this ranch, and I'm like, my slingshot is burning a hole in my back pocket. I thought I picked one of the best 10 items that had ever been picked. There's birds the size of chickens flying by in the tens of thousands. Now, we left here in the spring, like a month from now, 2 years ago, and it is just late fall there. You go out into the field, and you can't help but kick up a rabbit every 10 feet. They're just everywhere, just flying all around these rabbit trails that are like this thick. I'm like, I'm going to get out there. My slingshot is going to like feed me so well. Everybody else is like, oh, you're going to eat so well out there. do you have another slingshot? You know, I want to change out one of my items. After a week of orientation and telling us what, because every hill you go over in Patagonia, it's a different climate completely because of all the invasive species that have been introduced and stuff. So we had to figure out what was what. They fly us in over the glaciers, and we're up in this giant glacial lake. And they take me on a motorboat from the helicopter to this spot that I'm looking all around, these beautiful mountains and the snow peaked, and they pull into this dark cove of darkness and just dark. And I couldn't even see for like the first minute. And it's so dark there. And it's cloudy a little bit that day. And I'm there, and they say, all right, here you are. Toss your bags out, toss you out, and say, good luck. No, they're a little nicer than that. All of a sudden, they're pulling away, and they're driving off. And I'm just like, all alone, you know? And you could barely see into the woods. It was so dark. It took so long for my eyes to adjust. It was unreal. I just stood there, and I was like, I didn't know what to do. And it was like so overwhelming to be that alone all of a sudden. The weight that settles onto your shoulders and the burden I was not expecting that. And then I just remembered something my mom said, you know, when you find yourself where you don't know where to go from there, you just do the next thing. I was like, I don't have to survive 87 days or a year right now. All I have to do is do the next thing and do it to the best of my ability. So I turned around, I brought my pack into the woods a little bit, I started looking around, and I cleared a spot. There was only like one spot. The land went up at like 45 degrees behind me, about 10 feet in. The water and the driftwood, and we're up onto that hillside even up to about 4 or 5 feet. So I knew that instantly I knew that this is not a sustainable location. I remember from books that I had read, Jules Verne or something like that, water in Patagonia can rise really fast, and you could find yourself because of the water melting and it could be swamped. So I was like, I got to do something about this. Set up just a little A-frame of the plastic that they issued us, which is like a 10 by 10 tarp. And I headed up into the woods to explore real quick, just up and around, to make sure there wasn't something better. And I found that giant log that was about this high. And I was like, this is going to be where my shelter goes. It was the only place that felt a little brighter and wasn't as closed in. There's plenty of bamboo, and I instantly knew what I wanted to do. I had planned it out beforehand, drawn tons of drawings of how I build my shelter with the hurdle wattle-like fence, double thick walls, insulated with the material, and I'd be warm. I headed back down over the hill, and I started on my life there. I got up my ferro rod, so I started a fire. I wasn't able to get a fire going. I didn't get a fire going till the next morning. I had never used my ferro rod. That was one of the things that I kind of felt was a little bit of a failing. I had used flint and steel before, but I had never used a ferro rod. I watched everybody do it, and there's giant piles of sparks. I'm like, that's easy enough, you know. And I knew about prepping up materials, but everything was so damp there. The dark place that they put me in never really dried out all that often, and it was just damp and jungly. So I was like, oh, I went to bed that first night after setting one fish line out and hoping to catch a fish, thinking, what did I get myself into? I'm like, already, it's just like the boot camp. I get there, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do the next thing. And right now, that's getting some rest so that I will be able to think about it more clearly. And I started a routine that night that I carried all through my 87 days. I laid there and I thought to myself, what did I do wrong today? What can I do tomorrow to make it better? How can I better prep up my materials so I can get a fire? How can I catch some fish? And where else can I, now that I walked up and around, how can I build that shelter? And I started walking myself through everything that I needed to do, the immediate and the far future. I woke up that next morning to a sound of splashing fish. I had caught a fish on that sometime in the night. And I got up, and it was still dark out because it didn't get light until 10 o'clock in the morning there. It was getting darker. It was still getting darker at that point. And because of where I was, which I didn't find out until 12 days later, that it was like the dark side of the moon. I was in South America, and 12 days in, I went out and I looked, and there was the sun. I could see like a brightness coming from way above and behind me up on the mountaintop. And I could see it like coming through over the clouds that were blocking me from ever seeing it, and it was landing on the other side. I was on the dark side of the moon, and there would be no light for me the entire time I was there, I thought. And I just started crying, and I was like, it's like a pizza on the other side of a crevasse. That's my favorite thing in the world, and I can't get to it. And like, meanwhile, if there's somebody over there, they're like sunning themselves, and I'm going to be here in the dark. And I started crying, and I was just like so broken for that day. And meanwhile, I'd been feeling sick. That first 12 days, I used up all the moss on all the trees for toilet paper. I was so sick. That stomach thing, I thought I hid that one thing from the camera because I didn't want to be the guy that had to go home because he was sick, you know. And then day 13 came. It was just a day later after having that bad day, and I felt better all of a sudden. I started feeling like I had all this energy, and my body had cleansed somehow from just being out there and only having, at that point I was eating about a fish a day, and I had become cleansed, and I started my mind and everything started kicking into a new gear that I had never experienced before. I looked up and I saw the sun up on the hillside towards where I was going to build my shelter. There was a one ray of sunshine. I hiked up there, and I stood in that one ray of sun, and I was just about 100 feet up on this hillside, and I was just like, oh, thank you, God. Thank you, God. I don't have to be in the dark the entire time. And so I started like almost on the second chapter of my time being there. And I started hiking up after that, after feeling better. I had more energy. I started building stuff like the water bottle. I started hiking up over the hill every day to where the new shelter would be, digging steps into this hillside, thinking that as winter comes, it gets more wintry, I need steps to get over this hillside that was like 45 degrees up. And so I carved over 150 steps into the mountainside and switchbacks so that I could get zigzag up and over this hill safely to where my shelter was. And I built my shelter up there, and I made that crazy like yurt thing with this giant log incorporated in the back, which worked as a thermal mass. So once the place was up to heat, it would stay warm all through the night and everything. And so I started, I got all of my fish lines out. We were allowed 25 fishing hooks. I brought 24 and a sewing needle. That was one of my hacks. That I bent a sewing needle in the shape of a fishing hook, and they said that was acceptable because the sewing kit was another item. My 10 items were paracord, a shovel, the fishing line and hooks, the slingshot, axe, saw, multi-tool, ferro rod, sleeping bag, pot with a pan lid. And 3 of those items were nobody had ever taken a multi-tool on a survival show, I don't think. And people talked about the shovel a lot, like, why is this guy bringing a shovel? It was a cold steel shovel, so it worked as a small machete, basically, as well as digging. And digging all those steps provided me with, because I believe in one of my principles of being out in the woods was useful. So I was able to dig these steps, and every day I was digging steps, I found lots of grubs and worms. I bait all 24 of my hooks 3 times a day. I'd have all of them, or 2 times a day, I'd rebait them in the morning and in the evening. And I'd catch fish, and if I caught a fish, I could rebait them with gills and catch more fish. And so we was catching these trout that were like this big, or I mean, maybe this big, and a real good Maine fish story, right? No, they were big. They were, I mean, the smallest ones, I think, there were only 2 or 3 that were, 10 inches. There are some were like 10 to, 14-inch sized trout with fish eggs. So good. Every time, and there was these pink ones that were this pink meated, like a shard, I think they call it. And they were like the duck trap salmon that you can get at the grocery store. They were so juicy. I'd smoke them, just like out with the rabbit. I'd smoke them for 4 to 6 hours. And I had a recipe down, 4 to 6 hours of smoking, put them on the coals and sear them so the skin was crispy and just melt in your mouth. And I'd chew every single bite until it like disappeared without even swallowing it, because you just chewed it so much you accidentally swallowed it, because that was all I had. And up to day 70, day 72 or so, I had 60 fish. And that was almost a fish a day. With the fish head soup that I made everything else into, I drink that 3 times a day. Boil it, mash it, drink it down. 3 times a day. I drink every piece of sludge that melted, every piece of cartilage. I boil it till it was gone, till there was nothing left, and then I mash up the bones, and I drink it some more. I felt so strong. I hadn't felt that strong in years. And meanwhile, I'm hiking up and down that 8 stories every day to check on my fissuation and bring that fish up, process it, smoke it, and then put the fish head soup. On the days that I didn't have another fish, I put a fresh fish head into the fish head soup and enrich that, so I had a lot of nutrients. And I came out of there after doing that feeling strong, feeling really good. So as time went on, I had to continue to figure out ways to keep fed, and I tried building one trap I think it was about 1 trap a week for boar and things like that. I heard them at the beginning once in the night, and then there was no sign of them whatsoever the rest of the time we were there. Turns out all the big animals, all the rabbits, everything leaves the upper mountains during the winter time. So the only thing I had was fish, grubs, and dandelions. And let me tell you, grubs are no good. They're half full of, like politicians, it's just no good, And so I did what I had to do. I baited with some of the grubs, the other ones I ate, and so I could keep going. And at the end, at one point, I had collected up all these dandelion roots, and I only ate them at the beginning before, and my taste buds had changed so much I started crying, because they taste just like carrots. They were so sweet after not eating anything sugary for so long. It was unreal. And one of my things that I did to survive was I built the Duck Hunter 3000, I called it, and you saw that in the video there. It was a paddle boat with fishing hooks and fish heads on it, and I tried to send it out to catch this one cormorant that was swimming by. He didn't take the bait. He didn't go for it. He didn't want it. And then, 2 days later, I modified it, and I turned it into a fishing boat with a spring-loaded rig on it, built that dock so I could launch it out further, and I got it out into the sweet spot. And that thing actually ended up catching me more fish than anything else that I had set out there, because I had it out there in the sweet spot. And but it kept blowing in. So for the amount of days it was out there, it was only out there maybe 14 days altogether. And then at one point during a stormy period, I actually remodeled it, and that was that other picture you saw up there, where I had a propeller system, which I had couplings, and I'm out there, and they didn't show it. I had footage of the propeller firing up from underneath the water, the GoPro, and the prop wash coming off the propeller as it motored by and trailing its fishing hook with a little worm on it underwater. And I had to wax the couplings with bushwax, I call it. Earwax, because they froze up from the friction. And so I was just having so much fun out there. And it shows me having a little bit of a bad day with the fire and everything. And that was just my one bad day, because around day 72, I started running out of fish because it had been storming. The first month I was there, it was frosty at night, and then it melted during the day. The second month was frozen all the time. It was below 32 the entire month. And the last month it would snow all night and then rain all day, and then it got really stormy for those last 14 days that I was there, and I only had 3 fish. And so at the beginning of that time, I had one bad day, and it was my one bad, very terrible day. It was tough. And at the end of the day, I got back up to my shelter after all that stuff you saw there and the crying, and I'm sitting there, and I smell this burning smell. and I can't figure out what it is, like plastic. I'm like, there's no plastic out in the woods. I couldn't have thrown a log in with some plastic on it. You know, it's not like I'm burning pallets or something. And I can't figure out, and I look over and my boot insert had fallen in the fire because I had got my boots wet while losing that fish. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is awful. And I pull it out, and I had to use that leather for my saw sheath, which was one of my hacks that I knew I was never going to use the saw sheath again. It was just so I'd have materials. And I sewed that back onto my boot, and I still wear that boot with that leather toe replacing the plastic, because I realized that night when I laid down, I started doing my thing and thinking about what was going on. I'd even said it on the show, I just want everybody else to quit so I can go home. I was waiting for it to be over. I wasn't putting in my full effort. I realized that I needed to change my mindset. The next day I got up and I said, I'm going to put my full effort in. I'm not going to put off till tomorrow what I could do today. Consistent, persistent effort. I came up with that was my strategy. You know, if I could bait my lines with grubs, I'd get down there, I'd do it. I'd do the next thing. I'd always do the next thing. Consistent, persistent effort. Even though I wasn't catching many fish for that last 14 days because it was snowing, I still keep going. Never give up. And I just kept telling myself, never give up, never surrender, as long as I still have strength in me. And so I'd hike down over the hill, back up. I'd go out. I had to go about a football field away to do firewood. Every day I did 2 days worth of firewood so that if I broke my ankle or twisted my ankle, I could stay in my shelter and just continue to use that firewood. I had a firewood shed built outside next to my shelter that held the extra firewood. And I managed to keep my fire going for 50 days at one point. And this is my story stick, which has the entire thing here. Every fish I caught, every day for the day of the week. And each day I carve 6 symbols into it. What I achieved for the day, my physical state, my emotional state, the fish that I caught, the day of the week that it was, and I even had how many times I went to the bathroom on here, because after the 12th day, it was 8 days, 14 days, and 26 days without going to the bathroom, because it's just like you're eating such little and your body kicks into high gear of digestion. It's digesting your body for it, your energy, and I just felt so mentally crisp out there. I started remembering things from all those books that I had read, and it's just like, it was amazing. Jamie shows up, and I'm standing there, I'm thinking they're pulling me. I don't hear her coming up behind me. They got me like, well, how do you miss your family? I'm like, stop asking me these questions. It's like, as long as I still have strength in me, I'll never quit. I'll never quit. And I'm thinking they're going to pull me because they all like have these sad faces on. And I hear the 2 motorboats pull up, and they would come every 2 weeks or so and to medical check you. And I thought, this is it. They had come the day before. It's over. And one way or another, I'm being pulled, and I've lost too much weight, and I'm ready to protest and be like, I still have a little bit of weight. Don't pull me. I don't know like what their rules are for how they're going to yank me or what's going on. And then she sneaks up behind me. She says, it's over. You've out-stubborned them all. You can go home. And oh man, that was the best day. I didn't sleep for 24 hours after that. I was so jazzed to thinking about laying there. We would just lay there all night, and they're just talking about like what we're going to do with the money, how we're going to build a family home, and the adventures that we'd have, and all the stuff that we'd do with the kids. And now I had my whole story, you know, every day of it chronologicaled out so I'd never be able to forget it. And I put the fish head at the top because that was what kept me alive, is fish head soup. And God giving me a fish every day when I needed it. I was able to eat 63 fish and 2 birds. One I got with my bird trap, and one I got with my slingshot. I came home, and the adventure kind of hasn't ended, because since the show aired, I've been pretty busy with coming around speaking to people. We bought a mansion, and of course anything feels like a mansion after a 12-foot yurt. So we bought a place in Union, and we kept the land. I go up there and I use that for my filming. We've been cleaning that all up, so the camper and all that's going to be gone soon, and we're turning that into like a primitive place where I can build like a big old Viking house for a YouTube video and host Boy Scout events and stuff like that up there, and be able to pass on what I've learned to other people. And made the YouTube channel, and I've been doing that full time. I invested in all the cameras, drones, and all that stuff to make beautiful filming. I figured that was the natural step after 87 days of filming myself out there. I was like, everybody else thinks it's so funny. All the other guys are like, I don't want to see another camera ever again, except for Dan. The rest of them haven't. I don't think they've touched a camera because they like, that's enough. And I filmed every minute too. 12 hours a day I was awake, and 12 hours a day I slept because I was just like hibernate because I didn't have enough calories. So now I film myself doing a reenactment series about what I did out there, which is really, it turned out really great. It's very friendly to like everybody. I'm not so technical you don't understand it. It's like a Discovery Channel show almost. or I should say a History Channel show. And then we filmed about what it's like to win $500,000. So you can see my new Lamborghini on YouTube. Maybe they're that big, you know. And then my passion has been for slingshots ever since I went out there. Even though I only got one bird, I felt kind of vindicated because there was only two birds out there, and the whole time, which was the sparrow. And trying to beat the Guinness World Record now, and just keeping the ball rolling and waiting for the next time I have to go out and defend the All-Star title. Right now I hold the title of 87 days. The other shows have only gone up to 72 days, I believe it was. So I'm going to have to go out and defend my title against Alan and Dave and the other winners in a couple of years. They asked me after the show, they said, would you go do it again? I go, yeah, in 10 years I'll come back and go against the other guys. And they go, but Alan and Dave will be so old then. I go, yeah, I know. They didn't quit either. I need every advantage I can get, you know? So, yeah, that's my adventure. If you got any questions for me. And this is all the stuff that I built. Yeah.
It seems so unfair that you got a bad spot. Why was that?
We drew lots. We all had cookies, right, that they gave us around this campfire. And the show, because they never knew it was going to go 87 days, they just didn't have time to put that on the show. We all got cookies, and inside the cookies was a little card that told us our site number, a letter. And I took mine, and the cookies were really gross. And I was like, you know, it's bad luck to not eat your fortune cookie, right? So I ate my whole cookie. And then they're like trying to film us holding up our letter. I'm like, site D, and I ate my letter. And they're like, what? I'm like, okay, whatever. Maybe that's why they didn't use that segment. But I was the only one. Everybody else took a bite of their cookie and threw their letter and their cookie into the fire. And I was like, see, told you guys you should have eaten your cookie.
Anybody else get such a bad spot?
One person said that their spot was as bad, but he, up until the time he quit, was slaying the fish and stuff, and so I don't feel bad for him. He had like a river, and I didn't have a river and stuff, and I just was in the dark. I managed to stay in the sun like 3 more times the whole time I was there, and find a spot to like where it would come peeking through, because it was just the mountain just blocked it, and then the clouds, and it would shine up over me onto the other side. I could hear somebody on the other side. I didn't know who it was, and I tried to zoom in with the camera, and they're out there in the sun singing. You know, so I would do my part to go down onto my dock, and I'd be out there, I'm slaying the fish. Wow, I got another fish. You know, every time I was down there, I don't know if she said she never heard it, but it was Megan down there on the other side. I found out later. So, yeah. Yes?
How many days did the runner-up in your group last?
It was Carly, and she made it 86 days. They ended up having to pull her. Dave and Carly both reached a BMI of down in below 16. And they were very, very skinny. And when you get down that low, your fat that insulates your organs doesn't protect you, and your body can literally just start shutting down, cardiac arrest, just bad stuff happens. And that's where they decided to draw the dividing line. It never happened before. It was, Patagonia was such a sparse land, and the amount of stuff to catch and eat during that time of the year was just really low. Yes?
What was your BMI at the end?
My BMI at the end was 21. And I figured that at the rate that I was losing weight, after they told me at the med check and things like that, that I had somewhere between 3 weeks and a month before my BMI dropped to 16. But I also went in with a lot more weight. But I did eat, well, like 3 times to 5 times as many fish as everybody else. I didn't choose a food ration. I chose only tools, and everybody else chose at least 1 food ration as part of their 10 items. And so I didn't want to eat my food ration when I was hungry and then just not be short one of my tools. I couldn't imagine one of the things I would live without. Next time if I do it again, I'll bring all the same tools, minus I'm not bringing slingshot ammo, I'm bringing arrows to go with the slingshot. And I can shoot rocks, because the one bird that I got was with a rock. Yes?
Did you ever have your stomach problem diagnosed?
I studied it after. I've done if you guys know Jimmy Moore, who wrote Keto Clarity, about the ketogenic diet. And that's what I've been doing since I got back, because when I got out of there, my stomach was really sick again after eating carbs, and I had a hard time readjusting. I started gaining weight really quickly, and I'm feeling dumpy and tired again. And I studied it up, so now I do the ketogenic diet, which is like a 60% fat diet. and you do, and like minimal carbs of just from vegetables and things, and no pastas, no carbs at all, no sugars at all. And I feel so much more healthy and strong. I sleep better at night. I wake up crisp. I've never been able to get up early in the morning, and now I get up at like 4 and work in my studio for a while until my kids wake up. It's made all the difference. I have so much more energy. It fixes so many things, and it's like the best way to be balanced, I feel. Yes?
But did you have a way to contact them?
Yes, we have 3 pieces of radio and satellite phone and satellite texting machine. So we had like 3 different things that we could call in at any point. We were like required by our contract to have this on us at all times. So if we were even, tree falls on you, you're still pinned. You can still, as long as you're alive, you can send a message. So, yeah. Yes?
How did your wife make out?
She ended up going to stay with her mom for a while out in Seattle and stuff with the kids and just playing with them at the pool and at the lake and things like that the whole time. So she ended up just the goats and things were too much to deal with all on her own without me there to help, and so sold off all that stuff, and we left all that behind, and even more now that we've bought a house, and we're probably going to get back into it at some point a little bit up on the land as I have an apprentice to take care of it.
What did you use for a container to make your fish, to heat your fish from?
That was my pot there. I had a pot with a pan lid for just a really cheap Coleman thing, actually. And it's with a handle that could be put onto the lid and you can flip it over. And so I'd wake up in the morning, I'd put my fish head soup on like an hour or so before I would eat and put it on the coal, warm back up and simmer away until I had it good to go. And I used, one of my other hacks was a waterproof bag that I kept my sleeping bag in. So when I got there, it just became a water carrying bucket for that would be able to bring the water up from down below to my shelter, dip into that and boil it and stuff. Yes?
Did you bring string?
Yes, one of my 10 items was the paracord. So I made a net and the duck hunter and used it for lashing it. So each piece of paracord has 7 strands inside, and I break that all apart into its smaller components and wind it onto these little winding spools or net needles, and I could use them from there to lash my shelter together or lash some weird creation that I came up with at the time. Yes?
Was it all or nothing? The winner won $500.
We put together, one of the fans put together a thing for Carly, and I donated $1,000 and a bunch of other people donated. So she got a small lump sum. I can't remember what it was, like more than 5 and less than 10. So that was cool. And she's like, I talked to her, I'm like, just promote yourself. I mean, you're the longest lasting woman survivor and you never quit, And so some magazines have reached out to her and stuff. I mean, that's an amazing story. All the people that were at the end was Dave, me, and up into the day 70s and the 3 women, Yeah, a lot of the other people that quit were, thought would go further, and they just ran out of steam and weren't catching fish. So, yes?
Did you have any encounters with large animals?
You hear that in the first clip there? It's like, that's a big cat. Right there at the beginning, like day 3, I had a big cat. And the mountain lions there are the biggest mountain lions in the world, and it came through my area, and I'm backing towards the water with my camera stand, standing in an inch of water, and I'm like, whoa, and it went around my campfire and my shelter and then off, and I'm like, it just, the vibe I felt from it wasn't that it wanted to eat me, it was just like, it was passing through its normal territory. If you watch any of these other shows, that's what happens at the beginning all the time. Bears, all these things show up, and then you never see them for the whole rest of the season, because you're interrupting their normal habits, and then they go around you. They rarely ends up in an attack. Yes?
How old are you?
38, I think. 38. Yes, 38. I actually I lost 73 pounds in Patagonia and a year. Because when I went there and I applied for the show, I thought I was 37. When I came out, my wife told me I was 36, and that was going to be my 37th birthday or whatever. And I I was a year younger. So I was like, yee-hoo. Yeah.
That's probably a good place to wrap it up. Thanks so much, Zach.
Well, that's about it for us, but like I alluded to earlier, and if you're wondering, this was filmed 2 years ago. Jamie is no longer with us. No, she's still alive. She just took off. And we share and have 2 wonderful, beautiful daughters. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Fowler out.